I worked 4 years for one evening. I had been preparing for what happened at that evening for 3 weeks. This is the story of the night Derek miscalculated everything. My sister's fiancé, Derek, stood up at my graduation dinner and asked if he could say a few words. My name is Mara, I am 24 years old, a newly graduated accountant in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I watched him stand up and thought, here we go. He said kind things first, that's always how Derek works. He talked about family sacrifice and hard work, then he smiled and said, of course, a 3.1 GPA isn't exactly Harvard, but we're still proud. He said it warmly, like a joke, half the table laughed. My father, Ron, stopped smiling. My mother, Paula, looked at her plate. Derek raised his glass, then he took out his phone and played an audio clip. My voice, edited, reassembled, saying things I never said in that order. Then he reached across the table and knocked his drink onto my graduation gown. He laughed softly. He said, she's always been better at taking than giving. The table went quiet. My older sister, Brooke, said nothing. My closest friend, Jess, said nothing. I looked at my gown. I did not react. That was the part that confused everyone. Derek had been Brooke's fiancé for 2 years. In those 2 years, my sister stopped answering my calls as quickly as she used to. She stopped coming to family dinners alone. Derek was always there, always with a reason, always with an explanation for things nobody had asked him to explain. He would say things like, Brooke's been really drained lately, you know how it is with family expectations, said warmly, said with a hand on Brooke's shoulder, said in a way that made you feel like you were the drain. I noticed when it started. I noticed the specific dinner when Brooke laughed at something Derek said about my GPA, just a quick laugh, quickly covered, and then looked at me with an apology in her eyes she didn't speak out loud. I didn't say anything then either. I had learned that saying something to Brooke about Derek made Brooke go quiet and Derek get warmer and more reasonable, and suddenly I was the difficult one. So I watched, I kept my notebook, I waited. 3 weeks before graduation, I was at my parents' house and found the shared family tablet charging on the kitchen counter. I picked it up to check the weather. The video app was open. I pressed play without thinking. It was Derek sitting in what looked like his car, talking to the camera. He was practicing. He was rehearsing a story about me taking money from Brooke's savings. The details were specific. The tone was concerned. It was word for word the kind of thing that sounds believable when someone says it at the right moment to the right people. He must have synced it accidentally from his phone. The tablet was connected to the household account. I watched the whole thing. My hands were cold by the end. I copied the video to my phone. I texted Jess, I need you at my graduation dinner. Don't ask me why yet. She said, already coming. But now I'm bringing my work bag. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Brooke. I closed the app and put the tablet back exactly where I found it. I went home and I waited. The thing about Derek that took me the longest to understand was that he never needed to lie about big things. He only needed to lie about one thing, the wedding fund. For 8 months he had been moving money out of the joint account he shared with Brooke, not all at once. Small amounts, regular intervals, the kind of pattern that looks like normal spending until you look at all of it together. After I found the rehearsal video, I asked Brooke if I could look at her statements again. I told her I wanted to help her check her finances. She sent them. I saw the irregular withdrawals immediately. I knew the pattern was wrong. What I didn't know yet was what story Derek had built around it, what lie he had told Brooke to explain where the money went. I knew the numbers were suspicious. I didn't know he had pointed the blame at our parents. That part I would find out at the dinner. After Derek played the audio, the table was quiet. Then Brooke said slowly, play that again. Derek said, Brooke, she said, play it again. He played it. She listened with her eyes down. Then she said, that's not how I talk. I don't put sentences together that way. Derek said, I know it's hard to. She said, stop. One word. The table heard it differently than anything else she'd said all evening. I looked at Jess. Jess was already opening her bag. 3 weeks earlier, after finding the rehearsal video, I had asked Brooke to send me her account statements, told her I wanted to check something. When I saw the withdrawal pattern, I forwarded everything to Jess. Jess had printed them and brought them that evening. She put them on the table. She said, before this goes any further, these need to be looked at. If you need to hear what happened next, stay with me. Jess placed Derek's fabricated bank transfer records next to Brooke's original joint account statements. She didn't say anything for a moment. She just let the table look. Then she pointed to a column of figures on each sheet and said, these numbers should match. They don't. Derek said, those are old documents. Jess said, they're dated 4 months apart. The transactions in between are the ones that don't exist. Derek said, I don't know where she got those. Brooke said, I gave them to her 3 weeks ago. She said she wanted to help me check something. The table was very quiet. Derek looked at me. I looked back at him. I said, I also have a video from 3 weeks ago. Would you like me to play it? He said nothing. My father, who had been silent for most of the evening, put down his fork. He said, Derek, explain the numbers. Derek looked at the documents, he looked at the table, he said something about needing some air, he stood up, he left, he didn't come back. The table sat with that for a moment, the empty chair, the two sets of documents, the audio still on Derek's phone which he had left behind when he walked out. Brooke picked up his phone. She looked at the audio file. She looked at the fabricated records. She said very quietly, "He told me Mom and Dad took the wedding money for your tuition." I said, "I know." She said, "Did you know it wasn't true?" I said, "Not until I compared the records more carefully. I could see the withdrawals. I didn't know what story he had told you about them." She said, "How long has he been?" I said, 8 months based on the statements, maybe longer." She put the phone down. Mom reached across the table and put her hand over Brooke's. Nobody said anything for a while. I sat in my wet graduation gown and thought about 2 years of watching and waiting. It had become visible. My chest felt like it could finally expand all the way. Jess stayed at the restaurant with us for 2 more hours. She photographed both sets of statements. She wrote down the timeline on a napkin in her careful handwriting. She said, "Brooke, you'll want to call an attorney tomorrow, not next week, tomorrow." Brooke said, "I have a workplace report filed against him from 2 months ago." Everyone looked at her. She said, "It wasn't about the money. I didn't know about the money then. He had been using my professional contacts to get introductions for his own deals without telling me. When I found out, I filed quietly." She paused. "I kept hoping I was wrong about the rest of it. I thought I needed more before I blew everything up." Jess said, "That report and these financial records together, that's a serious case." Brooke said, "I know." She said it like someone who had been carrying that knowledge alone for too long. I reached over and held her hand. Brooke called her attorney the next morning. The workplace misconduct report she had filed 2 months earlier, documenting Derek's pattern of using her professional connections for his financial schemes, became the foundation for a broader case. The fabricated bank records were submitted as evidence of financial fraud. Derek's own rehearsal video, the one I had found on the family tablet, was submitted as evidence of premeditation. The charges took time, they always do. But they moved forward. Derek did not contest most of it. I think he understood, by the end, that contesting it would require him to explain the numbers, and the numbers were not explainable. Brooke called off the wedding the same week she called her attorney. She moved out of their shared apartment and back into her old room at our parents' house. I came over on a Saturday and we watched television and didn't talk about any of it for 4 hours. That was the first time in 2 years that being in the same room with Brooke felt the way it used to. I had forgotten what that felt like. I was glad to remember. 2 weeks after the graduation dinner, Brooke called me on a Tuesday evening. She said, "I need to understand these statements. The attorney wants me to explain the pattern and I keep getting lost." I said, "I can help." She said, "You're an accountant now." I said, "I am." She said, "Walk me through it." We spent 4 hours on the phone. I explained every transfer, every fabricated record, every place where Derek's numbers didn't match reality. She asked good questions. She took notes. By the end, she understood it clearly enough to explain it herself. That was the real graduation gift, not the dinner, not the gown. My sister calling me because she needed the thing I had spent 4 years learning. Some people spend a long time trying to make you feel small for what you know. The problem is, what you know doesn't get smaller just because they want it to. If this story stayed with you, like this video, subscribe so you never miss one, and tell me in the comments. Has someone ever tried to use your own family against you? Derek spent 2 years building a lie, just needed 3 words to start pulling it apart. These don't match, that's all it took.